Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Rockies Daily. I'm your host, Scott Ayers, where we talk all things Colorado Rockies. And look, for the few of you that have been kind enough to watch every episode or have tuned in quite a few episodes, you'll notice this background very different than what I'm normally recording in. I'm on the road this week, so you might see some of the normal setup. You might see some of this background. The lighting I'm still trying to figure out. So we're going to make it work. But what's important is we're going to still be talking about the Colorado Rockies every single day. You better believe it. And let's get into it. And let's talk about the young guys on this roster. A roster that has plenty of them. But one, this front office has said these guys will have to earn their spot. And now, after the deal from McCarthy that the Rockies made over the weekend, it just begs to ask the question of how will these guys start to find playing time? You think of outfielders Yanquiel Fernandez and Zach Veen, as well as guys like Ryan Ritter, Kyle Karros, Amador. These are all different guys that should have playing time in 2026, but it's not guaranteed. The first two names we mentioned are both in the outfield, in Fernandez and Zach Veen. And both of these guys, I think if you looked at the previous season, you could say, hey, they should be able to get slotted into the outfield, no problem. But now you look at it and can say, all right, maybe it's going to be a little bit tougher. Zach Veen is the guy that I want to focus on most, just because he has been in this farm system for a little bit of time and has been the guy that, really a lot of Rockies fans were excited to see. We were excited to see what Zach Veen could bring to the table, and he just hasn't met expectations yet. That doesn't mean he's not going to here in 26 and down the road, but 2026 is a really big year for him, and it's a big year to try to prove what his worth will be for the Rockies. And the hope is, by raising this floor, you're going to raise that competition level for these younger guys. The idea is that, hey, you're not just going to get slotted in just because there's nobody else. It's, no, you're going to get slotted in because you're the best player for this position. And so the outfield is interesting because there's legitimate depth. Whereas for guys like Karros and Ritter, third base and second base, there's really not much there in terms of competition unless the Rockies go out and get somebody. And so for those two, it's a completely different story where there's a good chance that we see Ritter and Karros starting on opening day. And that's a different type of pressure because if there's no one behind you, you might think, okay, this is great. But if you underperform, the Rockies might go out. They might try to bring up someone. They might try to go out and sign or trade for someone. Needless to say, this is going to be a pretty pivotal year for a lot of these younger players because the front office has been on the record of saying, hey, we're trying to find our core. We're trying to figure out what makes sense and what doesn't. And so I don't think there will be short leashes for these young guys, right? If they have a bad May, Josh Burns isn't going to say, all right, we're done with you. You're scraps. But if we see a continued struggles for some of these guys, like Adele Amador is, I would say, the closest thing to a hot seat for a player. And his, I was talking long leash or short leash, he might not have a leash. It might be too far gone for him. And so I think spring training in 2026 for Amador is going to be everything for him, because if he continues to struggle at the plate, there's a real chance that we just don't see him at the major league level. For Karros and Ritter, they're going to have a longer leash, and they're going to have an opportunity to prove themselves. But it's why we've talked on the show about the Rockies going out and trying to find maybe a veteran player for the infield, and we'll kind of note on some at the end of the show that the Rockies could look at. But really the idea is to hopefully raise the floor, to challenge these guys, because if they earn that spot, you know that they're the best possible player at that position. But you obviously want guys to develop. You want them to get playing time, but you also want them to perform well. So there's a lot that goes into it for these younger players. My hope, honestly, of all these guys is that we really see Zach Veen flourish, right? If he becomes an everyday guy in the outfield, that's a really good problem for the Rockies, just because of what we've expected and what the overall hype is for Veen. Because it also probably gives you an opportunity to trade one of those outfielders. Now that there is obviously depth there, but if you have quality depth, right, it's not like this outfield is incredible by any means. There are still plenty of opportunities to replace some of the guys in the outfield right now. If Veen is able to do that, that gives the Rockies an opportunity to actually maybe make a deal or find different ways to fix this roster. We mentioned in yesterday's show is putting someone like Tyler Freeman at first base, and that's kind of a nice transition to talk about this very limited infield right now, because while Karros and Ritter are slotted to be the starting second baseman and third baseman, we also have Blaine Krim, who's slotted to be the first baseman currently. If the season started today, Blaine Krim, Kyle Karros, and Ritter are all going to be vying for that starting position, and I think it's a pretty glaring weakness right now for the Rockies. And it might not be one that they fully acknowledge heading into 2026. And by that, signing players or trading for players, which just goes back to what the front office has talked about, right? It just might make more sense to figure out if any of these guys are good enough to be everyday starters. But I do think the prospect of starting Tyler Freeman or one of those outfielders at first base would be advantageous. I just don't think, with all respect to Blaine Krim, I just don't think he's going to be the guy. Which is why you look at, one of those outfielders or one of the vets, like Nathaniel Lowe, to come in and start for a season or two. And then, of course, at second and third, Karros and Ritter, who we've both talked about on this show, could be good. There's just a lot of inexperience in the infield. A lot of inexperience, with Tovar really being the most vet-like player in the infield. And so with that will come some glaring issues, and it will be very interesting to see how the Rockies will handle that. Just because, although we don't expect 26 to be some miraculous season that changes our lives and we're ascending to the heavens because Rockies baseball is so back, but you do want to see improvements, and you do want to see competent players on the field. So that is just the one thing. It's just, what is this infield going to look like come start of the season? But this front office has already started to make some moves in January, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see one more move made for the infield. I just think even if they sign another minor league guy, just to once again raise the floor and add a little competition. I just don't really like the idea of Carlson Ritter. Ryan Ritter has a little bit more competition for second. But there's really just not much in the way of the infield when it comes to competition and having quality players starting for you. So it is something to look at. And then, of course, let's talk about Tanner Gordon, who actually had a nice sizable jump from year one to year two. And you look at it on paper, he goes from, like an 8.5 ERA to a 6.3 ERA, a 1.7 whip to a 1.5 whip. But these are all really important jumps for a pitcher who's just kind of adjusting to the MLB. On top of that, a guy who's having to pitch at Coors Field. And so for him, year three is going to be a pretty pivotal jump. One, because we've talked about depth, but this starting rotation, you really have three or four guys that will probably be everyday starters, right? Will be the starting five guys in this rotation as they continue to solidify things with Lorenzen, with Freeland, with Feltner, and now with Dollander. And so with those four guys, it could be a bit of musical chairs for that for that fifth rotation spot. Now, obviously, over the course of a season, you're going to have guys who are probably going to be hurt or for whatever reason. So you're not just going to see 5 starting pitchers all season. But you want to kind of solidify the 5. And Tanner Gordon right now is probably slotted in that fifth spot. And so this third year is a pretty big year because, he obviously wants to be higher than the fifth best starting pitcher on the Colorado Rockies. But more importantly, just that opportunity to continue to pitch at a major league level. And so for him, he had some actually pretty big highlights. He had some tough starts, no doubt. But, he had a game against New York where Rockies won 3-2. He has 5 strikeouts over 6 innings pitched. He shut out the Cardinals in a 6-0 victory. He had 6 quality starts on the season. One of the big things, too, is he uses fastball about 50% of the time. And so really making sure he has a high-velocity fastball while pitching at Coors Field is a big deal because the second you start throwing meatballs, it gets very ugly for pitchers at Coors Field. So for Gordon, right, and really an expectation for Rockies pitchers, you're not going to see many guys with an under 4 ERA. An under 3 ERA is crazy. But an expectation, I think, for Rockies pitching really is if you can get guys that with a slightly over 4 ERA, as crazy as that sounds, like that's actually pretty good. Obviously, you want to have pitchers better than that, but for what the Rockies have right now and for what the expectations are for Gordon, if he's able to have another jump like he had from year 1 to year 2, year 2 to year 3, where again he's able to really cut that ERA down, to cut some of those mistakes down, that would be huge for the Rockies, especially as they work on finding out, these different rotational pieces. The hope is Tanner Gordon can be one of them for the future and beyond. He's about 28 years old, so he's still young. But for athletes, obviously, once you hit like age 32, 33, like you can really start to lose some of your stuff. So it'll be pretty big for Gordon to really, really figure out his role with the Rockies to hopefully be slotted in that fifth spot for the starting rotation. And then, hopefully moving forward, just continue to improve and make the jumps that he did from year 1 to year 2. Finally, let's end the show with just talking about free agency. The Rockies have obviously now signed a free agent in Michael Lorenzen. They have made a couple trades. And there's still a few guys out there that I think could be interesting for the Rockies to get. Willie Castro's still available if they are interested in a utility infielder. Nathaniel Lowe is available if they're interested in maybe just a first baseman. And then there is a reliever, Max Kranick, that could be interesting. For Kranick, he actually had a pretty decent 2025 campaign. He had a 3.65 ERA. More importantly, he has a fastball, a four-seamer that is just under 96 miles an hour, which is really what you would need at Coors Field. He uses a slider, fastball, and honestly could be an interesting reliever for the Rockies to look at. He just had surgery on his flexor tendon in 2025, missed just about half the season or a little over, and is now a free agent after pitching with the Mets. The reason why I mentioned someone like this is the Rockies will have to take chances on players that might not be the hottest of commodity. And that's where they've had success with guys, right? Like Mickey Moniak is a great example of someone that was kind of up and down. Not a lot of people had much interest in and flourish. Jamie Herga is another example who had a phenomenal year in the bullpen for the Colorado Rockies. Max Kranick could be another option who says he should be ready in 2026 to pitch. There might be other teams that are interested in him because he did have a pretty strong 25 campaign, but due to that injury, that interest is obviously going to be smaller than what you would see from relievers who are able to pitch to the full season. So this is an option for the Rockies if they want to try to just improve their bullpen a little bit more, which I don't know how you can look at the roster and say, bullpen's good, we're good to go. It's obviously not the biggest priority and they're probably not going to spend a lot on a new reliever right now just because of where the team is at. But if you're able to get a guy like this on a cheaper deal, on a 1 or 2 year deal, that can be really interesting for the Rockies. And once again, it all goes back to having options, and it goes back to having just different chips and pieces that you're able to trade for players in the future. And for someone like this, if he's successful and can pitch well out of the bullpen, that just gives another thing to the Rockies of what they're able to do when it comes to trades, building the team, free agent signings, all of that, right? Um, and so I think it'd be worth the Rockies at least looking at for a potential free agent target. But until then, we just kind of have to wait and see with the front office. But they've proven that they are willing to make moves. They're a little bit more methodical. They're going to take their time on some of the moves, but they are absolutely willing to make moves and to deal. So until next time, I'm Scott Ayers. I hope you liked the video. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe. Let me know if you like this random golf picture in my background. It's not the typical Rockies background, but, shout out the Masters. Shout out Tiger Woods. Anywho, until next time, I'm Scott Ayers. Thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful rest of your day.